Ladies and gentlemen, that's a 0.25% improvement on my number of times I had to say it last time. So thank you for coming back. What I'm delighted to do now is introduce our first keynote speaker. I shared with you our huge thanks to Dr. Sara Watkin for accepting the opportunity of presenting to us at short notice due to Dr. John Coleman being unwell. We cannot tell her how grateful we are that she has done that, because it's through the relationship of working through a number of different initiatives which she will share with us now. But on our journey over the last 2 years, this has been a trusted friend, a supporter, in really being the glue between the knowledge, the research, and making that accessible to frontline services. And we're really excited about the ongoing work that is happening. We had the gathering just earlier this month, which is highlighting Keep the Heat, but I don't want to take away any of her presentation, so I'm not going to tell you any more. My next thank you, I suppose, is a personal thank you. A personal thank you to Dr. Sara Watkin, because without her, I wouldn't have a family. And just 6 years ago, she was on a panel that approved me to have that opportunity. So I asked you to be vulnerable, and I've just done likewise. So please put your hands together for Dr. Sara Watkin. Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you.
Hi, thanks for having me. Oh, I've got to switch this on. That's it. All right. Yeah, thanks for having me. I will just make a little excuse. This is a little bit last minute, and my children, unfortunately, are ill with whooping cough. So I've been up most of the night and went back to bed at 9 a.m. and I've sort of woken up. If any of you have young children where you've been up all night and you sort of wake up with your eyes on and the wrong way round, if you've ever seen Inside Out and they go through that part where they become abstract people, and I feel just slightly like that. So I realised this morning that a part of my memory has slightly disappeared. So I thought, well, I'll just leave out the fancy words and talk about the stuff that I know really well. And as I'm giving my talk, you'll get a little bit of background to my rather odd, meandering career path, and it'll explain why I talk in such a random, chaotic fashion. But I'm hoping that by the end, things will flow, or they'll connect in your minds, even if they don't connect in mine just yet. Okay? So some of the slides I'll read out, and some of them I'll just talk over, and you can read them while I'm going. I am officially, my paid work is as a doctor in child and adolescent mental health. But I was a GP, and I've done various jobs in mental health and physical medicine. So I get quite frustrated about people sitting in their professional silos and offering really compartmentalised care. So I found this quote by Donald Winnicott, I kind of idolise him actually. And so he wrote, "Where is the child to be found? The child's body belongs to the paediatrician. The soul belongs to the minister of religion. The psyche belongs to the dynamic psychologist. The intellect belongs to the psychologist. The mind belongs to the philosopher. Psychiatry claims mental disorder. Heredity belongs to the geneticist. Ecology claims an interest in the social milieu. Social science studies the family setting and its relation to society as well as the child. Economics examines the strains and stresses due to public revenge on account of antisocial behaviour." And I guess I've worked in the prison with women prisoners, and I've liaised with the Circle Family Project and families outside who work with families affected by imprisonment. So you sort of see, antisocial behaviour big time, and you see intergenerational conflict. And I think that's what attracted me to the work that SCCR were doing. Now, I'm quite into sort of creative ways of getting problems sorted. And sometimes, especially with children, I notice it's very hard for them to put good stuff inside themselves, either because they're afraid of it or they have very poor self-worth. So I work as well on the side sometimes in my voluntary capacity with creative artists. And it's just a little example of how you can get kids to do something, change the way they behave, and let them put some goodness inside themselves. So we wanted to get kids in North Edinburgh, where I was a GP, and there was a lot of constipation. And I was handing out lactulose like it was going out of fashion. But actually what these children needed to be was happier, some of them, and eat better food. So we had a great artist, Alice Betts, and she came and did workshops with us at North Edinburgh Arts. And the children played with ideas with food. They made film animations, and they designed each other with food. And so this one is based on the idea of this little boy, who's my son, a long time ago, saying he thought that this food would make him strong. So he asked the children around to design him a 6-pack, and which is really, because he said, I only have a 4-pack. And Declan has a 6-pack, and his little brother went, and Daddy's got a 1-pack. So this was him with his big muscly shoulders and his fierce eyebrows, and actually he did try cabbage after that. So, and I'm quite interested in the whole body-mind connection, because I was at London Contemporary Dance School as a dancer for a while. And dancers obviously like to represent things in abstract form using physicality, and they're very aware of vitality, and we're trained quite well in sort of choreology, which is the analysis of human movement. So non-verbally, we think about sort of how people use themselves in space and the dynamics, the speed of how they move, how they connect sort of on emotional levels without words, and sort of the dynamics, the speed, the flow, the use of space, how we connect on a very human level is important to dancers. It's how they create their work. They talk about sort of effort of movements in terms of weight, space, time, and flow. I'm hoping I'll have time at the end to just talk a little bit about a teenager I saw the other day. So looking at his movements really was what helped tell me about where he was in his state of mind. So the psyche, the body is represented by the brain, may constitute the indispensable frame of reference for the neural processes that we experience as the mind. The body is used as the ground reference for the constructions we make of the world around us, and for the construction of the ever-present sense of subjectivity that is part and parcel of our experiences. Movement to be experienced has to be found in the body, not put on like a dress or coat. And that's partly why I wanted to support the application to work with Scottish Dance Theatre. Hope we get the money sometime. Because I do think that we mirror each other's movements. I don't know if you saw the David Eagleman programme the other day, where they looked at people's recognition of emotional states of mind, and they got the same people to then have Botox and then have to describe states of mind in a picture of a person, and they weren't as good as it with the Botox. Why this mattered to me was in Muirhouse we had over 800 parents on methadone prescribed, and it affects your facial expressivity. And so children are trying to connect and learn sort of reflective, capacities to interact socially with a parent where the doctors have prescribed them stuff that switches off, a bit like Botox. So, I think it was Perney Hall, headmistress, recognised this as a problem and did sort of facial emotional recognition educational workshops for her children. She was just intelligent and realised it was a problem. So you have to experience it, which is why drama is important, and if only we had drama therapy. I'm going to read you a little excerpt, what I do in my spare time. There were 58 hours in a day. This is work by a man who lives in Edinburgh called Colwyn Trevarthen. He's really worth reading or going to listen to. And he's really broken down sort of minutiae of interactions between an infant and their primary carer, and I'm just going to say mother for the sake of argument. And he's broken that down to sort of try and work out what he calls affect synchrony. Affect, if you think of mood, feeling, emotional state. So what I do is I go and observe babies with mothers to try and get a flavour of sort of this intersubjectivity and the language they speak together, because this is, from our theories of bottom-up brain growth. If you there's a slide coming up, isn't there, of the poster, the monkey lizard brain poster, which shows you how we've got our sort of tripart brain, and the base of the brain is in reptiles too, and then the next sort of emotional regulation area with the alarm centres in the middle, and then over the top we've got a lovely human cortical, neocortical areas. And these are developing, but they're all there at birth, but they have to connect. I'm not going to tell you how many billion bits and pieces there are, because I can't remember after no night's sleep. But so this is really important, and I think, as a mental health practitioner, that's what I'm looking for in interactions of the parent, the child in the room. But I see a snapshot, so the school teachers do far more to feed back to us about these interactions. So this is the sort of detail I get into, which you can imagine how my secretaries like typing my letters. When I moved jobs, I said, have you got any tips for my next secretary, Bridget, who was the first one? And she said, yeah, just tell her when she's about to dictate your tape, take a deep breath in. I mean, type it. Okay, so this is a little excerpt with a boy, okay? So Aaron begins to rock his head from side to side, eyes closed, as if stumbling in the dark, frantically looking for something but unable to see. He tightens his face more and more, inward gasps, short staccato, leaving barely time for his out-breath. His breath just accumulates as a pufferfish expands, then his mouth widens and he roars. There is a sense of magnetism and magnitude in Mum's speedy response to Aaron's call. He has formed 2 fists and is jerkily flexing his elbows, shaking his fists, you might say. Mouth wide, he bellows out a rich, cathartic howl. It is a free and full sound. Mum gathers in his cry, her validating, expansive bodily stretching, preceding her enclosing, scooping cradle of arms as she wraps him up in her open, volumatic, whoa, 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 vowels and voluptuous gesture, her gaze meaningful and pained. Her fluid diminuendo is matched perfectly with a softly condensed hold, and she slips her finger into his palm, stroking his finger rhythmically, matching this motion with her melodic narrative that reorientates them both to this new present moment of relief. He curls his fingers around Mum's and holds on, his little bucket-handle breaths rapid, his eyes closed. He rocks his head a little. Mum begins a melodic chant. That's my boy, it's okay. Time for sleep. He is resistant, his body remaining tense, and he lets out a smaller cry, several, all quieter, radiating less and less. Each little emission of sound seems to act as a tiny cathexis, and in ever-diminishing motions his breath changes, from tent-like sternal lifts as if pulled up by his breastbone a great distance, and then allowed to recover his elasticity. His respiration changes. Mum chants, gently, with an underlying pulse that undulates with a rise and fall of momentum, a lulling and hypnotic song, matched by her cradle-shaped sway. So that's the sort of beginning a baby needs to have. And if it doesn't happen, then you get problems later on, which we all know about. And unfortunately, you get structural brain changes. And if you have critical stages of development, so, if these stages that should happen when you're 3, 6, 9 months old don't happen then, catching up when you're 13, 14, 15 is really problematic. And I do work with foster carers as well with another charity. And it's really hard work for them. First of all, they have to understand this to make themselves willing to almost let a child regress back to an infantile state and not be annoyed with it because we understand why, so we can empathise. We understand what lies behind a child's behaviour. And just like the mother with a baby in her arms seeks to understand, to get down to their level and get in touch with their rhythms and expressions and breathing and sounds, so we need to do that with older children. But it's so hard because by this time their behaviour is antisocial. It comes across as vindictive, intimidating, frightening, because they project their fear. So, and this is another Donald Winnicott phase, and when I was working in the prison, I found his book called Deprivation and Delinquency, and it's fantastic. And I always write this on every presentation I do, because it's normally about teenagers who are acting out. By the time the boy or girls become so hardened because of the failure of communication, the antisocial act not being recognised as something that contains an SOS, and when secondary gains have become important and great skill has been achieved in some antisocial activity, and it is much more difficult to see what is there, nevertheless, the SOS signal that is a sign of hope in the boy or girl who is antisocial. So I had a boy the other day, if I run out of time, don't get anything, I'll just get through what I can because I haven't timed this. There was a boy the other day, and he's a bit like, I haven't seen there's something about Kevin, but I imagine he's going to be a bit like Kevin. And he's at the point where if we don't get things right for him now, I wouldn't want to bump into him if I was a young woman on a dark street, right? Because he's heading towards becoming a rapist. I mean, he's heading that way. He's going to seriously assault someone. It's not good. He's a really sort of handsome young lad, really physically healthy. He's in kinship care, and he had an awful start in life. He was really traumatized. I mean, rather than sort of receive his projections as a baby and modulate them, his mother was throwing at him all her distress, and eventually, very traumatically, when he was around, she killed herself, and it was awful. And then he was just thrown away from his dad. His dad just threw him away, literally like a sort of garbage bag, and he's held on to that sort of anger, frustration, mum's projections inside him. So he's got this kind of really nasty identity of a sort of unlovable, unlikable person. And he goes into school and, you know, he is really quite cruel, and he's making very derogatory comments to women in particular. He's attacking women. Of course, his mum attacked him, and says he's going to kill them, he's going to sexually assault them. And they're having to sort of maintain boundaries and teach another class of children, and they don't want them to be upset or feel intimidated. And now he's going for teenage girls. So it's not good, and he's going to be excluded, and then he won't finish education. In fact, it's looking terrible. And he comes across as quite depressed but defended against saying, I feel sad. He won't even get in touch with his sadness. It's too terrifying. But when he was sitting there, he comes across as quite psychopathic, really like poker-faced, held on. He contains himself. No one ever contained him, so he contains himself with like muscular tension. And then eventually, and I'm trying to get him to talk, he doesn't express remorse or guilt, which is a very worrying sign. Those are psychopathic traits. And we looked at where it was, and we talked about our parts, and we got the SCCR poster out, the lizard brain part, and we were looking at that. And because he's not that conscious eventually after the event of the damage he's caused. And we thought, why does he not feel guilty? And he said, well, it's not really a part of me that does the attacking on the women. So he's so fragmented, because normally a child is all over the place. They don't even know they fully exist or where they begin and end, and the mother begins and ends. And that all comes together, particularly in the first 9 months of life. He didn't have that. So he has this part of him, like an infantile part, that goes and attacks women, but he doesn't feel that's part of him because he's not connected, he's fragmented. So he doesn't need to feel guilty about it because he can just disown it. So, you know, helping people connect, and you can do it in abstract ways like the food on the body. You can do it through movement and drama and narrative play, but he needs to go back to a very early level, and talking therapy in a teenager that's like a fragmented infantile state boy is going to be difficult. So this is a beautiful picture. This is containment, like you said. This is the development of a child's sense of core self, which is kind of pretty well established by 9 months. And that the child can hold on to themselves because they feel whole from within. Sometimes you see babies kind of fix on a light or tense up. That's them trying to hold on to themselves. Esther Bick's someone who called it your psychic skin, and that if you don't have a primary psychic skin from the mother drawing your bits together, then you develop a secondary one, which is that boy's muscular tension. And if the stuff inside you is too painful to hold on to, too overwhelming, you will throw it out at someone else. And that's what they call projective identification. And then it's stuck on that person. So then you look at them with absolute disgust and contempt and go, look at you, which is teenage arguments. And it's why we need mediation to help people understand if a teenager has a bit they can't hang on to because it's too distressing and they throw it out there, then the last thing you should do is throw it back. So this teenage boy, of course, you want to punish him and tell him off. But unfortunately, that's making things worse. It's very hard as an adult or a teacher who's busy and doing 10 things at once to not want to punish him and just send him out the class, or in his case, he's been excluded, of course, again. It's the worst thing that could happen. You understand why adults do it, but actually, it's the adult response to children's behaviour that is key to success. So it's just another Winnicott quote. He is a bit of a man, eh? And so it's this thing about over and over again, hurting makes good, takes place. And gradually the infant comes to believe in constructive effort and to be able to bear guilt, and so to be free of love, to love instinctually. Because we all have guilt, and it's about bearing the conflict inside us. So this thing about conflict resolution coming up and up again, people know about attachment and how we need to be able to attach to somebody, primary carer somehow at a young age, because that person can bear our screams and our vomit and our poo and that when we're a baby. And then you come to be an adult, and that person having been able to bear your feelings, however disgusting and revolting, means that you realise that they are bearable. And so if you can bear guilt, you can process it, you can reflect, and mediation can take place, sometimes without any support. But if that's a struggle, it's almost like you need a mediation team to kind of almost hold on to the awful feelings so that you can unpack them. Remind me to come to Peter Pan at the end. So this is kind of the dance stuff coming in, actually, because like when you're developing your sense of vitality, there's a little thing I need to remind myself, but you kind of spatially, I love this because it's about sort of diagonal alignment. You're reaching the corners of the earth with these people. And this baby feels so secure that he can reach this sort of absolute extremes of exuberance. And there must be a little bit of fear there, and what we call double dip feelings. So, that we can tolerate fear and excitement, nervousness and anxiety, they're almost one of the same, and that you can separate these feelings out in the mind because you're experiencing them with your containing figure, the mother here. And she's almost projecting her exuberance into the baby and back again. So there's this lovely dance of attachment going on. And so as a dance, you can see it's alignment, it's spatially, they finish. You could say you take up that much space like this, or like that, it's got a different projection of energy. And so that child will tolerate these double dip feelings, one or the other, that are centered in the same part of the amygdala, this middle area of the brain. So they learn self-regulation and co-regulation. And teenagers kind of don't have the same level of neurochemicals that help them experience excitement. And sometimes the things that sort of counteract severe anxiety are in short supply. So you get a lot more depression and anxiety. And to get a high or a hit, to get dopamine in their system, they have to take really big risks. So if you can take risks creatively that are exciting and that you learn from, fantastic. But if taking a risk means doing something dangerous that might cause you to have a head injury, crash a car into someone, then it's not a good thing. So giving teenagers spaces to do stuff in. I really need sorry, I've got a little, oh, here you go. I love this. I need some prompts. So these are some lovely drawings, and you recognise this, don't you? You recognise these toddlers, and Daniel Stern is a just great psychotherapist, and he's broken these down into sort of stages of little children and what they go through. God, I'm meant to finish. So they're the agent of action, the experiencer of feelings, the maker of intentions, the architect of plans, the transposer of experience into language, and the communicator and sharer of personal knowledge. And when you don't get these stages, if they don't happen when you're little, if you don't have a sense of agency, then you experience a loss of control. And sometimes that can become paralysis. So we see it in people who are very floppy and tired. Children have fatigue all the time, that they can't move anywhere. In the prison, a lot of the women there would just have no motivation. People think they're lazy, but they're just kind of paralyzed because they never had this sense of agency. If you lose control, especially if you're a boy with more testosterone, then you do some damage. A sense of cohesion, if you don't have that, you have fragmentation. You have that teenage boy that can split bits of himself off, and then he doesn't need to worry about them, so he doesn't need to feel guilty. So you can't rehabilitate an offender who doesn't have a sense of guilt. So cohesion matters. The sense of continuity, going on being, and a sense of affectivity, which if you don't have a sense of affectivity and know your emotions, then you get depression, you get sort of loss of interest, they call it anhedonia, you get dissociated states, people talk about split personality or whatever, but you're kind of broken down. And so you need a sense of your own subjective core self. And this is lovely, this is what toddlers should be. They should be able to be stroppy and exuberant and temperamental and try all those feelings out, and sort of go to the brink and bring themselves back. And that tends to happen again in your teens because of similar brain remodeling in the frontal area. There's people now talk about neurosignatures, so I'm going to speed up a bit. Neurosignatures. Because I was a chronic pain specialist. I still am, actually. I'm an osteopath, so I'm an osteopath. So, and obviously I can't stick on one thing. I'm like a child with ADHD all over the place. But my children was going, life's so exciting. Incidentally, and I told them last week I was going to talk about arguments in families. One of them fell off his chair laughing, and the other one went, well, Mum, you've got a lot of experience. And so that's really good. Anyway, and then coming out and leaving them at home ill with whooping cough because they're in quarantine, they went, you're very good at looking after other people's children. Anyway, so, So, and the neurosignature is a concept by Melzack and Wall, and the training for me, where I broke away from medicine and go, if I see another person get Nurofen for chronic pain or tramadol, opiates, it'll break my heart. So all these traumatized people in North Edinburgh get methadone and tramadol to cure their pain. There's no evidence it works. Their children end up with a facial expressionless adult, the intergenerational cycle of abuse or neglect goes on. It's terrible. So Lorimer Moseley and David Butler, if you go on YouTube and watch Why Things Hurt with Lorimer, they have done a lot of education. These are their drawings with this Aboriginal artist. And they show very nicely this neurosignature stuff that goes on. So, you know, neurons that, fire together, wire together, all these little phrases people come up with. So if you keep repeating a neurosignature, it becomes deeply ingrained in the mind. And if something similar happens, it will kickstart the same neurosignature. So it happens in chronic pain, but in chronic emotional trauma as well, that if something is similar to the traumatic experience that's remembered, then you get a recurrence of symptoms. And that's why our PTSD people might have something just similar. Someone just is a bit shouty near them and things flare up again. Great one was I had a little violinist and she was traumatized, accommodated girl, and she had problems with violin, because I see musicians, and neural tension and all that. But the thing that was flaring her up, although we worked on her posture and all that, was because she had a really mean teacher who was yelling at her, "You're no good," and she'd been abused as a kid, so this was just breaking her down. And actually, what made a difference wasn't osteopathy, it was me saying, "You've got to get a new teacher," and she did, and she was transformed. So we're going to skip over this, the fact that, you know, if you've got a neurosignature that's stimulating your stress response in your lizard brain, it affects every organ in your body. You can go on YouTube and watch Lorimer's. So whether it's your hormone system, your movement motor system, you know, tensing up your... So she was tense up here, so she had problems in her violin arm pain. All of them, your immune system. Don't ignore that, this is much better. This is, look, that's a doctor's version. This is the good one. And so you can look at that in your own time. I'm going to skip through. The drug cabinets, but basically in the teenage years, which really bothers me, they don't have as many of the lovely reward hormones. They don't get as many hugs, so they don't get lovely nourishing oxytocin, which helps your brain grow. It helps DNA transcription and neurons grow and receptors grow. So if you don't get that, you don't get production of receptors to the nice hormones like dopamine. Dopamine's a big reward hormone, and noradrenaline fine-tunes things that fine-tune emotions. So you don't want too much. So you give someone ADHD medication that gives you dopamine, and for some of them it makes them more aggressive because of receptor imbalances. For some of them it improves executive functioning, this bit here, and they can do more pausing, impulse control, problem solving, so they can do their maths, you know, all sorts of things, executive function. So we're going to go with that. Oh yeah, I haven't got time for this, but if you listen to the Zombies, you can get The Way I Feel Inside, and it's a very beautiful song which reminds me of children who can't really tell you what they're feeling, and they just hope that you pick up on it. And I think non-verbally, that's what I'm looking for, you know, when I'm assessing children, because they don't tell you, and talking therapies are not always the way to go, which is unfortunate because that's mostly what we have in CAMS. So I'm not going to have time to go over this, but this is your typical young child, passionate, willful, selfish, you know, loving, and sometimes, there he is again, sometimes we see parents with mental health problems who are also similar because they haven't gone through these stages, and working with that is tricky because healthcare services in the NHS decide to split adult and child services and not communicate. That's a big bugbear. If I could change one thing, I was talking to Tam Bailey, it would be that we collaborate more effectively when the main carer has a problem. You can read that yourself. But that thing, if you feel helpless, the big thing that makes a difference, we all have adversity, we all have bad things happen, but if you have adversity with a sense of helplessness, that's when it becomes trauma. So if you feel empowered, and knowledge is power, so having insight, having something explained, having a mediator help you step back, take a panoramic view, look at things and understand what's going on, will already empower you to make change. And that's the really important thing in resolving trauma. The body does keep the score, and this is where at the very first slide, it matters if doctors see patients or health visitors or whoever, that they never compartmentalise a presentation of anyone, infant, child, adult, because most of what people present with in general practice, which is why I gave it up because it's pointless, 90% are mental health, mood, physical, chronic pain problems. Very small percentage is actual disease pathology. And so people present with things that the GP says, well, it's not a broken leg, well, it's not whatever. But it's because the body keeps the score. So that stress system, like I said, it affects every system in the body. It affects your neural sensitivity and your neurosignature. So you will feel symptoms that are kind of an expression of your emotional state and your perception of the environment around you. I wrote this about Peter because this was a boy, these are from medical records about Peter, and we use Shinari, this brilliant Gerfeck thing. I'm going to just read the red letters. This is quotes from a boy's notes who's now in secure unit. And, people writing in records about his presentation when he was only 8 years old. He's very, very abused. And he's still left with mum. He was sent back to her time and time again when she was very mentally ill because people thought it would be worse to remove him because he had a poor attachment. Okay? So I used Shinari to break it down and sort of make sure he stayed or went back to secure care. And it's a very good model. I'm sure you all know Shinari. If you Gerfeck, it's this safe, healthy, active, nurtured, achieving, respected, responsible, included. But it's a really good model. So every time I have something where professionals aren't communicating, I just put that down and we can see who can do what. So it's like it fragments things to get clarity so we can put everything back together and take a holistic approach. But if you think about this, killing himself and his mother, he's biting his toes, he's got a broken skin, he's uncontained, and he's been so violated that he feels her murderous quality inside himself, and to get it out, he says, I want to kill her. So, and this is a little boy's drawing who his bad feeling, he went and pooed in the playground for his headmistress, and she cleared it up for him, and he said, I had a bad feeling inside me and I had to get it out. And that's him and his dad with his vampire eyes and protective shields that he said, each one Dad builds around me is broken. So he's very, very disturbed. All three categories of abuse. I'm going to skip that. This is the teenage years, and this is, you've got to read, is it Daniel Siegel? So he's done Brainstorm, is his latest book, and it's really fantastic. And that's what I'm doing for my home learning with my quarantine boys tomorrow. We're doing health. And and he's got lovely mnemonics like Shinari, and one of them is Adolescence, and it makes you almost want to be a teenager again, but then I thought of Lisa. So that you've got emotional spark, social engagement, novelty, creative explorations, and it's a time of growth, and if you can let them expand their creativity and get their highs safely and socially engage and bond with their peer group, that's a good thing. Life should be fun. You should want to experience the world. And in Peter Pan, there's a little bit where Mrs. Darling sort of says, what is it she says? I wrote it down because I can never remember the exact words. She said that she tidies their thoughts up when they go to bed. She said, so the mean thoughts are folded away at the bottom and the nice ones are on top. And I think sometimes at the end of a session with mediation, we have to sometimes pack things away in a manageable place until people can come back for support. And, this stuff matters. Oh, that's not me. So I've probably left loads out, sorry. Thank you.